Excuse me. Good morning and welcome to the September Downtown Aviation and Redevelopment Subcommittee. My name is Daniel Valenzuela, Council Member for District 5. I'm honored to be the chair of this subcommittee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilwoman Kate Gallego, District 8, Councilman Bill Gates from District 3, and of course, Councilwoman Thelda Williams from District 1. We will call the meeting to order. The next item on the agenda is a call to public. We have a call to public at the beginning and at the end, and of course, anyone is welcome to fill out a yellow card to speak on any item. We don't have any cards for this particular call to the public. The next item is the approval of the June 23rd, 2015 minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 4 is for consent authorization to issue an RFP for stagehand services.
Move approval.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 5, the FAA flight path update, which has been an item, a standing item on this subcommittee for several months, and we will continue with this meeting as well.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, thanks for the opportunity to come visit with you and share with you what has been going on. I don't know if it's been since the last meeting, but probably so. Deb Ostreicher rejoined the airport and has been doing a lot of work on this specific issue, and so I asked her to come today to share with you an update on the activities we're doing in the community and in a variety of areas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Thank you, Mr. Blue. Is my microphone on? So first of all, Vice Mayor and members of the council, this is an action plan update on the plan that you all asked us to implement in the spring. And in the 10 weeks that I've been back at the airport, I've been focused almost exclusively on this issue and have seen a lot of great progress in this area. The 3 key areas I'd like to cover, of course, are the communication, legislation and lobbying, and the litigation. So starting with communication. Effective communication was a huge priority for you and, of course, for the city manager. So we immediately began and continue to meet with residents in their neighborhoods. And my staff and I have been in people's homes. We've been in local coffee shops, at neighborhood meetings, and we are not only there to disseminate information, but also to collect information from our residents. And I think it's been incredibly valuable to us, and I think to the residents as well. But one of the things that we learned at these meetings, where we were just very informally having coffee in the local coffee shops, is that we didn't have all of our technical experts there with us, and we didn't have a lot of computer capacity. So some of the residents suggested that we engage in more of a workshop format. So after making the rounds in these coffee chats, we then began conducting workshops, and that brought our technical experts, our environmental experts, community outreach, noise experts, everybody together in an informal setting, and we began those last week, and we continue to do those, with one coming up at Valley Garden Center next week. And more to be scheduled. Oh, we actually just this morning scheduled September 17th at Desert Brew, so we will continue to post all of those on our website. To further advance our communication, a resident also suggested, as you see on the lower right-hand corner, the red box that says Get the Flight Paths Update. That was not there previously, so we've added some things to our website in response to our residents' requests. And once you click on this box here, you can get to this page, and you see at the top there where it says subscribe to updates. So we post so much information on the web, and I really have to congratulate our public information team at the airport, because the mounds and mounds of information that is necessary to put on the website is there, and it's up to the minute all the time. And residents are able to subscribe to the website and get an update every time something new is posted. So if something happens, they'll get an email and it'll say, look here. There are several ways to register for the updates. I mean, you can register for the updates, but you can also file concerns either through a web format or through signing up in a Fast Track account. And I just want to quickly explain this to you because this has changed since the last time we've updated you. So once you're on the page, you can choose which way you want to go. Now, the web form is a typical, bit old school, but a lot of people prefer this, so we've left it there. We have to go in and fill in all of your information and let us know what your concern or comment is about aircraft noise. However, there's also this newer system where you just register an account, we have all of your information, and then all you need to do is go in and fill in your information. We know who you are. You just tell us when the aircraft disturbed you or whatever your other comment will be. And that's made it a lot easier for people. However, we do have some residents who are looking for us to take it even further and develop an app, so that even lying in bed, if you're awakened, as I know many of us can be from the aircraft noise, you can even more easily. So we will be looking into that even further, and we've already done some initial research. It's not as easy as we would like it to be, but we are continuing to look at that. And then finally, I just want to call your attention with regard to the web. This is what our website looks like today, but our web team is working on making that even more efficient and easy to read because of all of the documents that we weren't planning on cramming into this round hole, this square peg. This is a brief look at what the new Flight Path Changes website page will look like, a lot cleaner and easier. We've also been asked to provide videos for residents. This is based on the feedback that we've gotten in many living rooms and coffee chats that some people aren't as adept or don't feel like taking the time to navigate the website and look for information. But if they just got a YouTube link sent to their phone, they'd like to open that and get a 30-second or 1-minute video. So we have accommodated that request as well. We're doing that in both English and Spanish on our Sky Harbor YouTube page. Moving on in communication, of course, is the Metroplex issue. We continue to ask the FAA to allow this community to provide input with regard to Metroplex. We are on the phone and on email and in meetings with the FAA, constantly asking them, when will this community have the opportunity to give input on the Metroplex process? Thus far, we have not received any information back from the FAA about when that will happen. But we do know that it's happening in other communities. For example, here, you can see that in Southern California, the FAA is providing for that opportunity for residents. In fact, I think some of our residents here have even attended some of those, and at their request, we've sent our staff to go attend those as well so that we can see what they're doing there and be ready when they come here. And I will say when they come here to do that, because we will continue to ask for that. Further, you have asked us and authorized us to enhance our noise office. The 3 positions you see in yellow are the 3 new positions that you authorized that we are recruiting for. At the same time, we also had vacancies in the Deputy Aviation Director and the Community Noise Specialist. Jordan Feld, who is here today, is returning to the City of Phoenix, a former planner here at the City of Phoenix, and then went on to the Tucson Airport and is now back here with us, has taken over the planning, noise, and environmental area, and he's already doing great work on his 3rd day, so I'm very excited to have him here, and he and I together are recruiting the rest of the team. Legislation and lobbying is another area that you have asked us to focus on, which we are, and this is to encourage and pressure our legislators to pressure the FAA to do the right thing. And we are beginning to see some movement in this area, and I know many of you are already getting on the phone to your colleagues in other cities to ask them to call their legislators. So that's one aspect of the legislation and lobbying efforts, which are being supported, of course, by our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And at the same time, we're using our industry groups, both in aviation and in city organizations, to help us touch base with communities in other cities so that as a nation, we communities can put that pressure on the FAA to do the right thing. And then finally, of course, is our legal efforts, which we continue. And we have not only filed suit, as you well know, but our neighbors also have come together to file their own lawsuit, and our attorneys are in close contact with one another and being supportive of one another in this effort. So As you can see, we're not taking a single approach to this issue, but working closely with our residents to together find resolution for this issue. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by my colleagues? Councilwoman?
With colleagues, including the Vice Mayor, we hosted the Secretary of Transportation 2 weeks ago now for an event focused on ground transportation. And we had a wonderful community dialogue, particularly focused on light rail. And it was a great opportunity for us to illustrate what a productive dialogue we can have when we convene stakeholders. So we did point out that we would love to do the same thing around airport noise. And he shared that he was very aware of our interest and would keep that in mind. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to move forward in that area. And we're working very hard to continue to remind the federal government of the issues that we face here, although no one working as hard as you are.
It's a joint effort together. Thank you for that.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deb, for the presentation, all that you're doing out in the community. And I know there are particular areas of town where this has been a real issue, but you've been even up into District 3. And I appreciate you doing that and spending the time there. And I also want to thank our congressional delegation, obviously Congressman Gallego, but throughout the delegation. And in fact, I had the opportunity to speak with Senator McCain yesterday and thanked him for all his efforts and told him that we will really appreciate his continued involvement in working with his colleagues back there in the Senate. So it's a long haul here, but you're doing great work, and our delegation is doing a great job representing our interests as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, absolutely. We do have one card. Mr. Steve Dreisterson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. My name is Steve Dreisterson. I'm a resident of the FQ Story Historic District, and I'm here for this item. Unfortunately, to recognize the anniversary. It's been almost a year that we've been putting into this effort. It's an extraordinary effort. I want to thank staff. I want to thank Deb Ostreicher, Paul Blue, everyone in aviation for all of their effort. I thank the council members for your effort, our congressional delegation, the neighborhoods. Everyone's pulling in one direction. The only one that's not pulling in a direction right now is the FAA. And I know we have a 6-point plan. I think hopefully in the end it will be effective, but we can't let up. We've got to keep it going. I'm very encouraged to hear that the senator apparently is on his radar screen, and I appreciate that he is taking the time to move this effort forward. We need to hear from all the senators. We really need to work on the Reauthorization Act, and this is our next best opportunity. So in 1 year, I hope to come back and say we were successful, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually would echo all the comments made by Mr. Dreisterson. We're moving in the same direction. Our city staff, our elected officials, from of course our local elected officials, our federal delegation. It all starts with the people that we all represent, which are the people of these neighborhoods. And thank you for all the effort that you put forth. We're moving in the right direction. We can't let up. We have to continue to move this effort forward, and I think we all understand that as well. So hearing no other comments, I think we are ready to move to the next. Thank you so much, Ms. Ostreicher.
Mr. Chair, Tammy Fisher is here, Assistant Aviation Director, to discuss Phoenix Mesa Gateway. This is an interest of the subcommittee that we walk through each of the airports. We focus a lot of attention on Sky Harbor, and rightly so. It is the biggest activity engine for the aviation department, biggest economic engine for the state. It deserves a lot of attention, but we would be remiss if we didn't discuss, and we're very appreciative to the subcommittee for asking us to come tell you the story about the reliever airports, because they play actually a vital role not only to the success of the community, but actually to the success of Sky Harbor. And they each have their own unique position and place that they play. They're all active, and Phoenix Mesa Gateway is our commercial reliever, and Tammy's here to tell you the story both of how we started and where we are and where the future goes. Tammy?
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, Vice Mayor, subcommittee members. You may know that Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport was formerly Williams Air Force Base, and it closed for military operations in 1993, and Williams Gateway Airport opened in 1994. The airport was later renamed to Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport in 2008 to really recognize it as a commercial reliever that serves the Phoenix metropolitan area. Phoenix became a member of the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport Authority in 2006, so it's been nearly 10 years that we've been a partner in the authority. At that time, when we joined the authority, they had a single airline operating charter service to Las Vegas. And I'm getting ready to tell you a very different story about what's happening at that airline or at that airport today. Allegiant started in 2007, shortly after Phoenix became a member. They have grown like gangbusters at Phoenix Mesa Gateway. Spirit and Frontier had offered service at Phoenix Mesa Gateway, but have since relocated to Phoenix Sky Harbor. And there's the pictures that go with everything I just got through saying. Sure. We are one of 6 member governments in the Gateway Authority, led by Executive Director Jane Morris, who I believe is here today, so I'd like to recognize her leadership there with all of the member governments. As I mentioned, Phoenix joined the authority in 2006 as a regional partner, with an initial contribution of $5 million to their capital program, and we provide $1.3 million per year as our member contribution. The total member government contribution is 4.06. In July of 2013, Apache Junction joined the authority as well, making it 6 people. Each, the board of directors is made up of elected officials from all the member governments, and beginning at the next board meeting, Councilwoman Williams, who has been representing Phoenix on the board for quite some time, will chair the board for a term.
Good for all of us. Congratulations.
Phoenix is a bit unique in that we are the only member government who actually owns and operates a commercial airport. And so over the years, we have been, I want to say, a special partner in the scheme of the member governments. Phoenix Mesa Gateway certainly does not put up the same economic impact numbers as Phoenix Sky Harbor, the largest economic engine in the state, but it is a significant economic asset in the community with a total impact of $1.3 billion for the community and several thousand jobs there at the airport, plus 10,000 jobs supported in the region. Very similar impacts for their community in the East Valley. It is a small hub airport serving just a little over 1 million passengers. Most of those currently are produced, all of those are produced by Allegiant, but Elite Airways has recently announced that they will begin service to San Diego beginning November 1st. And that's been an important airport initiative to expand the service offerings. Allegiant does serve 35 nonstop destinations, but it's important for an airport to have more than one carrier serving the market, and so it will be good to see Elite start service there. Phoenix Mesa Gateway, we always pride ourselves at Phoenix Sky Harbor as being a very low-cost top 10 airport in the country. But I recently learned that Phoenix Mesa Gateway, according to the Department of Transportation, is the second lowest among the top 100 airports, with a cost per enplaned passenger, which is how we all measure ourselves, of $1.73 per passenger. So we're very proud of our, $5.60 at Phoenix Sky Harbor, but that's an incredible achievement there at Phoenix Mesa Gateway, and important for the particular air carrier and the service that they provide at Phoenix Mesa Gateway. And this is just a map showing that the destinations that are served by Allegiant, the yellow dots indicate the Allegiant destinations, and then the San Diego location is noted that Elite will be serving shortly. Phoenix Mesa Gateway will be constrained at some point and unable to continue to grow their service at certainly at the same pace that they have grown it over the last 10 years. And so they have been in the planning process for new terminal facilities and airport infrastructure on the northeast side. They are currently in the planning process, and they have also been working on roadway infrastructure in conjunction with the local municipalities, and Arizona Department of Transportation freeway infrastructure has gone in to support a future new entrant there on the north side of the airport. There is no plan of finance or specific timeline for this development. The airport has not had the opportunity or the revenue base to be able to bond finance improvements of this magnitude, and we expect that the member governments would be asked to participate in the funding of this project, along with the use of federal grants and other available funding sources. In the meantime, Phoenix Mesa Gateway has continued to expand their current facilities to get every bit of capacity out of the current facilities and be able to grow their business. They have expanded their current terminal operations several times now. I believe they're up to 10 gates with now Allegiant and Elite starting service. They also have quite a bit of real estate on the southwest side for other operations. They have quite a few aviation service providers that have developed on the airport, and this is an important source of revenue for the airport. It's a more stable and reliable source of income for the airport to enter into these leases with other users at the airport. So over the years, our roles and responsibilities have changed a bit. As I mentioned, Phoenix, when we joined the authority, we were the only commercial airport operator among the member governments. And so we've worked very closely with the Phoenix Mesa Gateway staff to make sure that we share best practices and lessons learned from Sky Harbor. So we've been a bit of a consultant and advisor to the Gateway staff on things like rental cars and parking and concessions and future development and infrastructure planning and environmental issues. We also, of course, partner with Phoenix Mesa Gateway along with other airports in the Valley on airspace issues such as the Metroplex and pulling. We have frequent meetings quarterly with the airport directors in the Valley to discuss issues, aviation issues that affect all airports in the region. In recent years, our roles have evolved. We have found ourselves now that Phoenix Mesa Gateway has emerged as a very viable commercial reliever. We find ourselves sometimes in a competitive situation with Phoenix Mesa Gateway. Recently, you may have read media coverage of Allegiant's desire to relocate to Phoenix. We actually were a proposer when Allegiant was first looking to come to the Phoenix market. We gave them a proposal to operate from Sky Harbor. In 2007, they actually chose Phoenix Mesa Gateway, but have recently expressed interest in coming to Sky Harbor. Unfortunately, we don't have 6 to 8 gates to accommodate their current operation. So our roles have morphed into a new era, but we still work together very effectively as partners providing air service to the region. And I think I would congratulate Phoenix Mesa Gateway for developing over the past few years into a very fine commercial reliever airport to Sky Harbor.
Talking about Allegiant, I think it's worthy to note that they may have, Mesa Gateway may have the lowest cost per passenger, but Allegiant is the reason because it's a very low-cost carrier. Mm-hmm. If it ever came to Sky Harbor, I don't think it could say that anymore.
That's right.
But I think you're being very modest. I will give you all the credit, and Sky Harbor all the credit I can, because they have worked very closely with staff over the years and have really been a teacher, a supporter. You have guided them in and out of some problem areas and forewarned them of others. So I think it has been a very good partnership over the years. They're becoming more mature. It's an interesting process to watch because many of the mayors that serve on that committee, their only exposure to aviation and airports has been this. And so it's a real learning process. And Tammy come out to an executive session, and I'm not going to give you the details, but I will tell you, it was kind of aviation 101 for a airport, a commercial airport, but it was very well received. There was a perception that we were trying to steal Allegiant, and that was never the case. And after Tammy's presentation, people come up and said, we now understand. We no longer think that's true, and we appreciate you. So I thought you did an excellent job and made real progress. I also want to comment on the fact that besides just the commercial operation, they have a lot of military operations for fueling, and that is where all your firemen that fight the forest fires get refueled. So there's a lot of traffic in and out of there beyond just Allegiant and the new carrier. So I think it bodes well for the future. I think that we will continue to see the numbers rise out there. And I thought it was interesting. It ended up being named Phoenix Mesa Gateway. Mm-hmm. Mesa has the most money invested. But nationally, no one knows where Mesa is. Everybody knows where Phoenix is. So although I like to think it was because we're so important, the truth is it helped them make an identity across the nation, and it has worked very well for them. We're working on a strategic plan out there on how to make improvements, how to go forward to get additional carriers in there. And I think it has been, for me, it's been a real pleasure to serve on that board and work with these people. And Jane, who worked at Sky Harbor, become the executive director, 2 years ago? And has done an excellent reorganization, has made them much more efficient, brought in expertise, and has really focused on not only the airport operation, but the surrounding uses. And because there are so many opportunities, you've got the Polytech there, which has a very large school. There are so many students there, and now they are seeing more and more sub-businesses coming in that are aviation related that are really making the area people set up and take notice. So I want to thank you and aviation staff, and just give Jane a lot of kudos because she's doing an excellent job.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for your leadership on the board. Another unique part of our membership there is we are also a municipality that isn't adjacent to the airport. And so, Councilwoman Williams, you've shown great leadership to remind the other authority members when the time is right to represent the protection and the interests of the airport. And sometimes you have to take your municipal government leader hat off and operate strictly as an authority member to do what's in the best interest of the airport. And so thank you for your leadership in that way.
Anything else from my colleagues? Tammy, thank you for your leadership, and it didn't surprise me one bit hearing all of those things, and just to help educate everyone else out there. It doesn't surprise me. You know, we are fortunate to have Jane here, the city of Phoenix, for many years, and thank you for all of your service. And I also would like to thank you, Councilwoman, because of your leadership, most importantly, but your experience and your willingness to share that experience, not only with all of us, but with Mesa and everyone else who you spend time with. So, thank you.
Thank you.
The update.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 7.
Mr. Chair, Chad Makowski, Assistant Aviation Director, and Joe Husband, Airport Manager for the Goodyear Airport, are here kind of in the next sequence of presentations to tell what is actually a fascinating story about the Goodyear Airport, both historically, but also the very relevant role that it plays for us today. It's important, it matters. It's, again, another interesting situation where we actually have an airport in someone else's community. It actually plays an important role to Sky Harbor, and Chad and Joe are here to help tell that story. Chad?
Thank you, Paul, and Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee. Again, Chad Makowski, Assistant Aviation Director. I am a private pilot, and I don't know if you know that about me, and so one of the things that really interests me about our two general aviation airports is I got my start in this industry at an airport very similar in size to the airport that we're going to talk about today. And so it really speaks to why this is such an important investment, not only for the region, but also for Sky Harbor as we talk about as pilots grow and they choose their professions. Some will choose to continue to be general aviation pilots. Some will choose to be commercial aircraft pilots, but they all get their start somewhere, and this is one of the places where they do that, as we'll talk about soon. So Paul talked a little bit earlier about the importance of the importance and purpose of reliever airports, and Goodyear, the Phoenix Goodyear Airport is one of them. First and foremost, it's really designed to ease congestion at Phoenix. And if you think about in the 1950s and 60s, Sky Harbor, believe it or not, was experiencing double-digit growth, in some cases as high as 25% growth year over year. And so really want to applaud the leadership at the time when they strategically thought about how do we manage this growth and where do we invest and what's the appropriate use of Sky Harbor Airport. They really saw Sky Harbor as being a premier centrally located commercial service airport. And in order for them to continue to meet the needs of the growing demand at Sky Harbor, they recognized the need to invest in other airports around the region. A little known fact is that the city of Phoenix had the opportunity, and Joe will talk about it in a little more detail in a moment, to acquire Goodyear before we even acquired Deer Valley Airport. So we actually acquired this Goodyear Airport in 1968. We acquired the Phoenix Deer Valley Airport in 1970. So it was one of the very first acquisitions of the city of Phoenix to address the growing demand at Sky Harbor. The other thing, of course, which is very important to all the community, is to provide a focus on general aviation access and services. General aviation airports do more than just train GA pilots. They provide critical services to the community. For example, Deer Valley Airport, we have our police air support unit. At Phoenix Goodyear Airport, we provide important services to the local area as well for emergency, disaster relief, access, if you will. We also have an incredible relationship with the Luke Air Force Base and provide services to the base as a very close airport, very close proximity to the Luke Air Force Base. We also, it's important to separate smaller and slower traffic from commercial traffic. And an example of that, the airplane that I flew when I first was getting my pilot landed at about 65, 70 miles per hour. Well, as you might imagine, the commercial jets coming into Sky Harbor are landing and taking off at speeds of 150 to 200 miles an hour. Now, from a congestion perspective, as you might imagine, if you were to sequence in every other plane, one going 60, another going 160, the demands and the spacing that is required to make that happen would have made Sky Harbor untenable. It would be a very, very challenging environment. And so this really helps us to invest appropriately in all of our airports. So this is just a quick snapshot of where the Goodyear Airport is. It's about an 800-acre parcel property, single runway. It is located just south of the I-10. We have Litchfield Road to the east. We have MC-85 to the south. We have Bullard and Estrella Parkway to the west, and to the north we have Yuma Road. As Paul had mentioned, what's very unique about this relationship and what's very timely about this presentation is that while the city of Phoenix owns the airport, it wholly resides within the confines of the city of Goodyear. And I would just like for a moment to take a moment just to talk about the fact that earlier this week, on Monday, we did a work session presentation to the mayor and council of Goodyear. It was very well received. They're very, very thankful for the relationship they have with the city. They really wanted to take the time as well to acknowledge the understanding and leadership, obviously, of the mayor and council in the city of Phoenix for supporting the growth of Goodyear. But we couldn't do that without understanding what their interests are in their community, and so it was a really good session where we had a chance to talk to them about what their vision is and what they'd like to see in the future for Goodyear. And so now, if I might, I'd like to turn it over to Joe, where he'll talk just a brief bit more about the history, the current conditions at the airport. We'll talk a little bit about our key partners, business partners at the airport, and then we'll talk a little bit about development and what's coming in the years ahead.
And Vice Mayor, members of the committee, thank you so much for having us here today. As Chad mentioned, I'm Joe Husband. I've been the airport manager at Phoenix Goodyear Airport for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I've worked at all 3 of the city's airports over the last 25 years in various roles. This, the area in the West Valley actually started, that really developed out there because it was learned that cotton grew extraordinarily well in this climate. And in the late teens, late 1916, 1917, Goodyear Tire and Rubber was actually in the process of providing tires for the first mechanized war in World War I. And they were having some challenges actually getting cotton, and previously used Egyptian cotton, to their manufacturing facility in Ohio. So when they learned that cotton grew well out in the West Valley, they bought like a bazillion acres out there, and it became the company farms for Goodyear Tire and Rubber. And from that, of course, you know, we need to have the rail line in there to haul the cotton out, as well as to get the occasionally the visiting executives in. The Wigwam Resort actually was developed because we started having more folks coming out there to visit the company farms. And then in the 20s, Goodyear Aerospace was relocated from Ohio to this facility, and it's in the large facility that's along Litchfield Road that's adjacent to the airport. That was Goodyear Aerospace, and they did a lot of development of course, balloons, and we're all familiar with the airships, but they also built a lot of aircraft components and aircraft, and in some cases, whole aircrafts. And they had a particularly interesting relationship with the U.S. Navy. I say interesting, it was very close. They did a lot of work that complemented the work of the United States Navy. So as World War II was approaching, they actually gave the property that the airport is now situated on, 780 some odd acres, to the U.S. Navy to develop what became Litchfield, or Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park. Throughout the years of World War II, as well as Korea, we'll talk a little bit more later, but they served really primarily as a base to refit, service, and make ready aircraft that were going overseas to support the war effort for the Navy and the United States Navy, United States Marine Corps. Many, if not most, of the aircraft that served in the Pacific Theater for the Navy and the Marine Corps actually came through the Phoenix Goodyear Airport, at that time Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park, on their way overseas. Likewise, when the hostilities ceased, many of those aircraft that were coming out of service actually came through Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park for decommissioning. So it's a pretty unique relationship that, like I said, all grew out of the fact that Goodyear Tire and Rubber had this relationship with the United States Navy, developed this facility, and it was had a big impact and was very instrumental in the growth and development of the West Valley. So we, as you know, there were many aircraft, up to 5,000 aircraft, that were actually stored there at one time, and the Department of Defense determined to consolidate those storage areas in other places, like down at Tucson and the Boneyard down there, and other places in California. The Southwest is particularly well suited, of course, for aircraft storage because of our climate. So as they continued to move those activities to other fields, then the activity at Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park went down, and as a result, in the late 1960s, they were looking for an opportunity to surplus that property. At that same time, as Mr. McCuskey mentioned, Phoenix Sky Harbor was looking for reliever sites. So we actually acquired the field in 1968 and have been operating as a general aviation reliever airport ever since. So here's just a quick snapshot of facts and figures. We have 147 T-hangars. Those are for small aircraft, light aircraft, either singles and twins, 22 covered tie-downs, and approximately 200, 250 based airplanes, and that fluctuates with some of the activities out there. In the last 2014, we had approximately 84,000 aircraft operations. That's either a takeoff or a landing. And that is a very busy GA airport, but not nearly as busy as we have been in the past. We were actually up to, in 2007, we had 188,000 operations. Much of that reduction has come with general aviation in general, the reduction in less people flying aircraft. However, it's still a very busy airport because we have a very active flight training activity that's there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We have a pretty significant economic impact, even more so economic impact than Phoenix Deer Valley Airport, at 135 million of total induced and 70 million, and approximately 600 to 650 employees on the field. So quite a busy airport, a lot of activity. What makes Phoenix Goodyear Airport unique is that we have a very long, strong runway. So while we are a general aviation reliever airport whose primary role is to relieve that light traffic from Sky Harbor, we also can take and do regularly accept larger aircraft, air carrier class aircraft, and they are there taking advantage of one of our business partners. We'll talk about in a few minutes, AeroTurbine. So we can accept even the largest aircraft that come through. I got a call just day before yesterday that we've got a 747-400 that's going to be coming in there for a lease return. So it's a very unique thing, and one of the things that Goodyear has allowed, having Goodyear and having that long, strong runway, and also some of the facilities, some of the large hangar facilities that we have had there since the Navy days, is that it offered us the opportunity when we needed to relocate our maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility at Sky Harbor several years ago to make room for the S1 and the S2 concourses. We were able to relocate that activity out to Goodyear. You can't do that at just any general aviation airport. So we're a little bit unique in that aspect, is that we're primarily GA reliever, but we have that very high capability. Some of our business partners, as I mentioned, AeroTurbine, they're a maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility for large frame aircraft. Airline Training Center of Arizona has been there for 40 years as training pilots. Primarily they're a Lufthansa Airlines-based subsidiary corporation, and they have a number of partners that train there as well. They're responsible for probably 80 to 90% of the air traffic. And then Luxair Jet Centers is our fixed base operator that provides services to aircraft there, and the Galaxy International is another business partner that actually provides us with they do work for supporting aviation by doing manufacturing and recertification of aircraft parts there. So a very diverse, both diverse activities as well as a diverse revenue stream for us. And as you can see, we this fiscal year that just ended, we had $2.27 million in revenue and about just about $2 million worth of expenses. The remainder of that goes to support, of course, our capital program, which is also partially supported by some of the from Sky Harbor, who supplement some of our FAA and state grant match requirements. So that's a little bit about the facts and figures. I mentioned AeroTurbine. So this is a shot of the AeroTurbine hangar. That's hangar 52. They do all of these types of things: aircraft maintenance on large frame aircraft over 12,500 pounds, aircraft storage, aircraft dismantling and final solutions for aircraft, painting, cargo conversions. Essentially, they can do anything there on any of the large aircraft. Very busy. They've grown. When I got there 5 years ago, they had about 50 employees. They now have about 400 employees. So they've really increased in their flight activity or in their business activity. Even when they're very busy, it really represents a very small usage of our runway. So they might have 10 to 20 operations a week, and they're still quite busy. Another of our business partners, of course, is, as I mentioned, the Airline Training Center of Arizona. For 40 years, they've been there. This is a Lufthansa airline wholly owned subsidiary corporation. The current head of the school there, Captain Matthias Kippenberg, actually took his initial flight training there in the 1970s. So they've been there a long time, and they train for a variety of partners, as I'll talk about here. The German Air Force and Navy has been there for the last 25 years training their pilots. And in fact, every German Air Force or Navy pilot that learns to fly starts their training right at Phoenix Goodyear Airport. So it's a really great partnership that actually Airline Training Center has had with the Luftwaffe for many years, and we're very proud of that extended relationship that we have. Some of the other airlines that are business partners of Airline Training Centers, KLM Dutch Airline trains pilots there, as well as All Nippon Airways also trains pilots there. And so it keeps us pretty busy. And then recently, CTC Aviation, which is a United Kingdom-based flight training organization, works with a lot of the English and Northern and European airlines to provide them with flight training services. They expanded their operations into North America about a year ago, and they selected Phoenix Goodyear Airport and Airline Training Center of Arizona as a place to do that. So they're in a pretty steep growth curve right now. They've been there for about a year, and they are actually expected to double their student base within the next year. A lot of the growth that they're experiencing, actually it's a little slower than they'd like it to be. They bought an entirely new fleet of aircraft, and that takes some time to get those in. They don't just, 50 of them show up in one day. So a really good business partner for us. AeroTurbine, that was on the previous slide, is our largest revenue generator, our largest revenue contributor to the airport, and Airline Training Center is our second largest revenue generator for the airport. Luxair Jet Centers has been for the last 8 years our FBO there, and they've actually came in and occupied the terminal under a kind of a pioneering agreement while they built their business. And now they have built their business to the point that they've just broken ground on this facility that you see before you. That's the airside an airside shot of it up at the upper left-hand corner, and then the main picture there is the land side, what it's going to look like. So this is broken ground. We've tendered to them a 25-year lease option that was in their original contract when they were selected several years ago. This brings new opportunity to the airport, more opportunity for aircraft storage, like business aircraft storage, things like that, as well as full service and larger, a higher degree of maintenance activities that are available. So some of the things that we do out there, we have the 2 NASCAR races that go to Phoenix International Raceway. Those are 2 big weekends for us, and we get a lot of traffic through there, sometimes up to 50 aircraft that come in to support those. Of course, Super Bowl was a big deal for all of the airports in the Valley, and Goodyear was no exception. So this Luxair Jet Center, also a very great partner for us. What's going on at the airport? We've currently got a couple of projects that are underway. One of them is you'll notice on the left-hand picture, that's the red box there at the end of the runway is what's called the extended runway safety area. And that extended runway safety area, which is a 1,000-foot buffer zone at the end, if you will, due to the geometry of the airfield, protruded a little bit through our fence and out onto Yuma Road. So as a result, we are shifting the runway 300 feet to the south. Now, of course, you don't pick it up and move it down. We're going to add some pavement to the bottom end, and then we'll restripe everything, remark everything 300 feet further south. And so that allows us to shift that runway safety area and the obstacle-free area down so it's no longer in a non-standard condition according to the FAA. So that is one of the projects that's currently underway right now. It's expected to be completed in late October or early November. And at the same time, because we are a single runway, one taxiway airport, in order to minimize the impact on the national airspace system, but also on our users at the airport, we're doing 2 projects at the same time. And that is the second project that will kick in sort of right towards the end of this project is a resurfacing of the asphalt portions of our runway. So those are 2 of the projects that are currently underway. As you can see in the picture on the right side, to your right, that is the new configuration with the previous. Once we add the pavement to the south, we'll eliminate that red area, that pinkish red area at the top, and then the new beginning of the runway will be there by that blue intersection. So that's going on. Also, if you'll notice on the picture to the left, we have the runway protection zone, which is the large trapezoidal area, and part of that exists off the field, and the FAA actually requires that you control those spaces. So we're in the process of doing some land acquisition that will be in the state-funded grant program. We're starting that process right now. And then when that's done, just according to our normal sequence of maintenance activities, we'll be doing some apron and taxiway pavement rehabilitation that'll come up in next year's grant program. All of the capital improvements out there primarily are funded either through the federal FAA Airport Capital Improvement Program or the state's ADOT Aeronautics grant program. And then, of course, as I mentioned, those grant matches, we rely on Sky Harbor for a little bit of a contribution there, about $700,000 a year on average. But we've done quite well in becoming sustainable.
Mr. Chair, just a question on that. So is
Yep.
that included? The 700,000 that you mentioned, is that in the expenses that you had up there? That's in addition?
In addition. So those were our operating budget, or OPEX. So that's all of our operating revenues against our operating expenses. The capital is in a different stream. But as you notice, we had a little bit of surplus. So we're getting closer and closer to becoming completely self-sufficient. And that's really been our goal for all of the airports. And Deer Valley is in a similar situation. But no, it's not included. That was purely operating money there.
And Mr. Chair, just to follow up, so I think you said that the number of takeoffs, if I'm not mistaken, it was up maybe around about 188,000 at the peak, and now it's down about 84,000. So have you had a commensurate reduction in expenses and staff as well?
Not significantly. In fact, our revenue has grown, Vice Mayor and Councilman Gates. We've actually grown over the last couple of years due to some additional leasing to our business partners and some new agreements that have come up. Most of our revenues are generated off of essentially land leases, if you will, or facility-type leases. So it's not necessarily directly correlated to the number of flight activities. Now, what has reduced to some degree has been our fuel flow, which is 10 cents per gallon. So with less fuel being flowed on the airport, then there's a little bit less there, but it's not been significant reduction.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, sir. And I talked, a blue streak, and I know some of you know me, know that's one of my, I don't know if it's an asset or a liability, but I don't want to put anybody to sleep, and I'm about to get done here, and thank you for your question. These are the activities that are coming up, and then really, we're at our path forward. So we've got a master plan update. The last master plan was approved in 2007 by the council. Was completed using 2005 data, so we're about 10 years beyond that. And so that is actually getting ready to go out for selection. We're going to put that out to select a consultant to do that. We expect a grant from the FAA to do that master plan in sometime this late winter or early spring. We continue to work on business development and self-sufficiency. As I mentioned, that's one of my highest priorities in the mission that I've been given by my boss. The aviation activity is increasing. I mentioned that we had 84,000 last year. We're expecting to be back at 100 this year. The runway projects are going to put a little bit of a dent in that, but not significant. And we expect that to continue growing back because we were at 188, then 2 years at 180, and then it dropped into the 160s, 140, 120 last year. Or excuse me, the year before last, 84 last year, and now we're on our way back up for flight operations. And the economic environment is certainly looking like it's getting better, and we're starting to see some interest being shown on possible development at the airport. Mr. McCuskey mentioned that we presented this week to the Goodyear City Council. They're an excellent partner for us. They're very appreciative of the airport, and we work very closely with their economic development team as well as the other services that serve the airport or that the airport touches out there. We meet regularly with Luke Air Force Base as well as Goodyear and or Glendale and the other airports that are around us. And, we regularly have folks either from Legislative District 4, we saw them recently out to the airport, City of Avondale out to the airport for opportunities to learn more and understand more about the airport, and look for opportunities where we can collaborate and, come up with good synergies. So we're proud of the West Valley relationships that we have. We're really proud of the relationships we have with our business partners out there. We have excellent business partners to work with, and that's really struck me very starkly as I've been out there. We have business partners that we're all working together towards the common good of the airport, and all of our successes then translate into more success for Phoenix Sky Harbor and the entire airspace system. So we're really, it's an exciting place to be. I invite you all to come out at any time. We'd love to show you around, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And forgive me if I've gone on a little long.
It's good stuff. Any questions or comments?
I'll make a comment. I serve on that Luke Community Council, and the mayor of Goodyear often compliments you on how well you work together and how you take their ideas and make sure that they flow in and out of the airport so that it maximizes their needs and doesn't harm you in any way. So I just think that takes a lot of effort, and I know sometimes some cities can be difficult. I know Phoenix never is, but some of those others are. But they're very, very strongly supporters of yours. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams.
Yeah, very impressive, and this helps not only all of us, but it helps all of the viewers also to see how it all comes together. So I appreciate bringing this type of a dialogue in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Cool. Chad, maybe you can teach me how to fly?
I'd love to.
Okay, item 8, downtown event planning and coordination.
Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you for your time to discuss with you about downtown events. I think we all, at least I personally and the people around this table, spent a lot of time working in the details on Super Bowl, and so we remain very proud of the outcomes that happened this last year with in the days and weeks that led up to both the Pro Bowl as well as the Super Bowl being hosted at the University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, and the surrounding events that occurred not only in the region but very specifically in downtown. One of the lessons you have been giving us and you have been asking of us, and the downtown business community have been asking us, is downtown is like an event venue. We want to see more event activity occurring over time and not just every 6 or 7 years that the Super Bowl comes to town. And so we are on it. John Chan, the Convention Center Director, is joined by Tom Sadler from who wears a couple of hats, and he will describe those, but is most specifically for today's presentation with the Arizona Organizing Committee, but also leads as the staff for the use and operation of the stadium that the Cardinals play in. And then Debney Preuss is also staff working on the upcoming National Football Collegiate Championship game. And so we're here today to tell you both about what's going to be happening coming yet this year into just right in the first weeks of January, and then more fundamentally how we're trying to deal with event activity in downtown, because what we would tell you is we had about 1 million people came out for Super Bowl Central in downtown Phoenix. I'm here to tell you we're going to see equal that amount of people across the next 12 to 18 months because of the great amount of activity that is interested in being in Phoenix. And so we are starting to see reproducible activity coming into the downtown. We want to tell you that story, tell you both what's going to happen near term and then how we're trying to manage that in the long term. So with that, I'll turn it over to John to get started.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, we're delighted to be here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the event planning activities that city staff is working on. In January, we will be, the Greater Phoenix region will be the host of only the second time, the College Football Playoff National Championship, which will be played out in Glendale. So we want to talk about some of the CFP-related fan events that will be occurring in downtown Phoenix. We're also going to be talking a little bit more about how the city has organized itself from a planning and coordination standpoint. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some of the future events that are in the early planning stages. So before we get into the details, I'd like to turn it over to Tom Sadler to talk a little bit about the organizing committee and their role in working with the city and the other partners in the region.
Thanks, John, Mr. Chairman, City Council, men and women. Thrilled to be here today on behalf of the Arizona Organizing Committee. A little bit about our background, but I'm going to have to step aside and give you a little history real quick. The former College Football National Championship, and they like acronyms, so that was known as the BCS. And the BCS championship game was rotated between 4 bowls, the Rose, Orange, Sugar, and Fiesta, and some complex set of computer ratings determined who the top 2 teams were, and obviously argument ensued after that. And hence now we have another acronym known as the CFP, which is a College Football Playoff. They're putting forward a system whereby there's a playoff. In other words, a selection committee, not a computer this time around, will determine who the top 4 teams are at the end of the season, and those teams will square off against each other in 2 of 6 bowls. Now, before in the BCS, there was what I could call a 4-bowl coalition. Now it's 6. So it's the original 4, plus the Cotton Bowl and the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. And in that scenario, those semifinal games, which have proved in their first year to be very, very, 1, exciting, but 2, very popular from just a television standpoint, but from a destination standpoint, folks really flock to those games. Those games will rotate through those 6 bowls every year. So that means that the Fiesta Bowl will receive the opportunity to host the semifinal game every 3rd year. And just coincidentally, next year is the 3rd year, so we'll have a semifinal game here at that point in time. The championship game, as I said, is not one that's going to rotate between those bowls. The CFP, who is governed by a committee of college commissioners and athletic directors, determined that cities or communities were going to need to bid on these events to host the championship, not that dissimilar from a Super Bowl opportunity or Final Four, which, by the way, we host in 2017. Had to throw that in. And so when the first go-around went, and as you all know, it was the first game was staged in Dallas. We were not really part of that bidding. I think it was a foregone conclusion, though there may be some argument from some that that game was going to Dallas. The CFP has a staff of about 16 to 18 folks. They are homed in Irving, Texas, so that was kind of in their backyard, and for their first one, it made a lot of sense. So in the second year, it went out for bid, and a number of cities bid on it. We put together a local organizing committee, had a lot of underpinnings from the Fiesta Bowl, but essentially it was a community bid. Through that process, I believe in December of 13, I thought about that today. It seemed like that a long time ago. 13, we received notice that we've received a bid for the second national championship. We're very proud of that. Part of that commitment, obviously, when you go through the RFP to bid on these things, I'll oversimplify it, but they have a number of requirements, and this isn't exactly how it works, but every time you check the yes box, the more yeses you have, the greater opportunity you have of winning the bid. Unfortunately, when you check the yes box, that typically does cost you something. So we formed a committee, the Arizona Organizing Committee. As Mr. Blue said, I'm the president and CEO of that organization. We have two co-chairs, which is Brad Wright and Wynn Holden, a vice chair, Sherry Henry. As mentioned, Devney's on staff. We have 4 or 5 other staff, paid staff members, 3 of which came over from the Super Bowl host committee. So we developed that continuity. And we're in the middle of planning feverishly for this big event on January 11th, which is known as the College Football Championship. That weekend really is a 4-day celebration of college football, very different than the BCS. That seemed to always be, it was the game, and maybe it had some other ancillary events, but not like this. Both of these folks will take you through these in greater detail, but you can see if we start at the top, and I'll move through them quickly, you can see the areas that are shaded in which these things will take place. First, you have the CFP Fan Central, and I'll ask that you chime in if I get the location wrong, and that's at the Convention Center. The CMT Ultimate Kickoff Party, I think we're changing that to the Ultimate Kickoff Party. CMT is no longer involved. Again, that's at Block 23. So is Playoff Playlist Live, which essentially is their concert series on Saturday and Sunday night. We have a golf tournament that's going to be staged on January 8th. Night of Champions is really an ESPN event, and I thought we just had a venue location change. So Warehouse 215. Warehouse 215, if you're familiar with that. Extra Yards for Teacher, again, at the Convention Center. That's their charity arm foundation. We're going to host a CEO forum, as the Super Bowl did, leveraging that as a sort of a economic development tool for Phoenix, and bring in 25, 30 or more CEOs from around the country and show off Arizona during that 2 or 3 time period, all culminating with them being able to attend the game on Monday night. Taste of the Championship, and that is still in the Convention Center, John? Okay. Media Party is going to be in the venue in Scottsdale. As it states there, the 5K is in Tempe. Playoff pregame, championship tailgate, and championship game will all be out in Glendale at our stadium. So you can see there's a wide variety of events, and as you just heard me tell you, there's a whole bunch of them downtown. And I want to thank the city of Phoenix for doing that. And I'll sign off here in a second. But one of the things I've noticed at going through and bidding on events, and I was with the team that bidded on the first unsuccessful Final Four, you take a lot of feedback from that. And then hopefully improve your next round of bids. But the one piece that was very difficult to get over to some degree is Phoenix is a great destination. It's a great place to go, but the event seems spread out. You know, once Super Bowl Central came around and the hub became downtown Phoenix and the game was out in Glendale, we didn't hear that anymore. So thank you for everything you've done, and hopefully we'll continue to do. And I'll turn it back over to these folks to give you the details.
I'll talk a little bit about some of the events that will be occurring in the Convention Center. The Playoff Fan Central is the CFP's college football themed fan festival that will run for 3 days, again in the Convention Center. Also, as part of Playoff Fan Central will be Media Day. So on Saturday the 9th in the morning, both of the teams and the coaches will come in, and each will have an opportunity to have a 1-hour press conference with about 1,000 credentialed media members. It'll be broadcast live on ESPN. If you have a ticket to Fan Central, you'll be able to get into the Media Day, which will be right there within Fan Central. So that'll bring a lot of attention. In addition to ESPN, we expect the conference networks to be broadcasting out of Media Day as well. As Tom mentioned, the CFP has a number of community initiatives. Extra Yard for Teachers Summit is one such. It's a half-day education summit for 1,000 teachers around the region that will be held at the Convention Center, motivational speakers, and information for teachers on that event. Then also, this is the CFP's fundraising event, the Taste of the Championship, which will be a charity event benefiting the CFP Foundation, the Extra Yard for Teachers, and local food banks. As we talked about, part of one of the important elements of hosting the College Football National Championship is the downtown campus, and so Devney is going to talk a little bit about some of the plans for that.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Good morning, Mr. Chair and subcommittee members. If I can take a quick step back in time to Dallas last year, almost a year ago, year one of, as Tom mentioned, the CFP. The events were spread out, and while they were well produced, they weren't as well attended as the CFP had hoped. So a couple weeks later, they had a chance to then tour the Super Bowl Central event in downtown Phoenix, and they saw how we created this centralized hub of activities and really placed all the NFL signature events in downtown and created critical mass for all of them. So similar to Super Bowl Central, we, the local organizing committee and City of Phoenix staff, are working with the college football playoff folks to again plan a similar free, family-friendly, football-themed outdoor fan campus in the heart of downtown Phoenix, and it will be for those 3 days leading up to the big game on January 11th. So the outdoor portion of the overall downtown campus, as we'll see on the next map here, will again be free, programmed with activities from Cityscape to Collier Center between Washington and Jefferson. And the gray dash line on this map represents that outdoor portion of the campus. And it also represents the special event liquor license area that we are looking to, again, secure. And we will invite the restaurants and bars within the perimeter to, again, participate in that special event liquor license. So again, we really want to create this destination location for fans and locals by connecting an outdoor campus to the signature events that are occurring inside of the convention center, as John already mentioned. And if we can move to the next slide, while that footprint that we saw was more linear, smaller in size, as Mr. Blue mentioned, we expect numbers as large as what we saw for Super Bowl Central because of the level of talent that the college football playoff folks will bring in for their Playoff Playlist Live concert. So Block 23 will have the main concert stage, and it will again be programmed with local talent during the day, but then it'll change over to national recording artists at night for this Playoff Playlist Live concert. In Dallas, they featured Sting and Lenny Kravitz and are talking a little bit more contemporary for our go-round, and it will be a 3-night event versus a 2-night event where they held it indoors at American Airlines Arena in Dallas. It'll be outside again on Block 23 north of US Airways Center. And then in addition to the A-list talent that will be performing live from the heart of downtown Phoenix, ESPN has also committed to a live broadcast set on Block 23. So the concert stage will be again positioned in the northwest corner of Block 23, and ESPN will be shooting towards that concert stage, again, showcasing the development in downtown Phoenix to a national audience. They'll have various programming throughout the day, and each night will end with, I believe, their Sports Center show as soon as the concerts end.
So, undertaking such an extensive event that occurs for multiple days in the downtown area requires a lot of planning and coordination. So the city, on the city staff side, we have a steering committee that is comprised of members from no less than 15 city departments that are involved in the planning and coordination. We've organized ourselves into 7 working groups, which is really where a lot of the ground level activity gets planned. We have 3 working groups that are dedicated just to transportation, parking, streets and traffic. Obviously, our public safety working group plays a big role in coordinating with federal, state, and local agencies on the public safety side. We have a permitting team that is focused on the licensing and permitting and the signage for the outdoor campus. And then a downtown community outreach group that reaches out in conjunction, working closely with the Downtown Phoenix Partnership and the AOC to reach out to the downtown neighborhoods, the business community, property owners and managers on planning and giving them information on what to expect. And then the marketing communications team really focuses on building excitement and interest, and that's where they manage the know before you go messaging and telling fans how to get to the downtown, what's the best mode of transportation, where to get tickets. So that's where a lot of the detailed work gets done. So we've asked our working groups really to focus on 3 areas. That is operational plans for each of these 7 categories, also developing contingency plans in case of emergencies, how are we going to respond to that? And then the third piece is a communications plan. How do we communicate internally with each other, with our partners from the organizing committee, and with the public. And so that's generally how we're organized from a staffing standpoint. And then just talk a little bit about, in addition, some of the major events that are in the pipeline, if you will. So as we get to January of next year, we'll also be hosting in downtown Phoenix the 27th annual Cactus Bowl. That it's going to return to downtown, and that will be played out at Chase Field. They also have a tailgate party that will be held in downtown also on January 2nd. We move into the College Football National Championship activities from the 8th to 11th. From there, we transitioned into the McDowell Mountain Music Festival, which has been held at Hance Park in March, Cinco de Mayo Festival in May. And so that takes us through the summer. And then the Downtown Phoenix Inc. is working on developing, in the preliminary stages, a major music festival, 3-day festival that would occur potentially sometime in the fall of that year. And then, as Tom mentioned, we move right into the NCAA Men's Basketball Final Four in the early part of 2017. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Paul.
Thank you, John, Tom, and Devin. Appreciate it. And Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think John's listed a number of notable, high-profile items. I see Dave Roderick in the room from Downtown Phoenix Partnership, the team from our downtown organizations. And I think you all are familiar with the events that are going over time. It's, I don't want to say exploding, but the volume of interest in downtown and the events that we already do now in the downtown are going to be interlaced with each of these. And John's description of how we get the city team together to make sure we can appropriately, essentially it's organize our day job in a way that that day job is providing appropriate service to these activities. We're kind of getting to the point where John and I kind of led the city team on a day-to-day basis through Super Bowl Central, and it was high profile, and that was appropriate. As you can see, this John actually does need to run a convention center, and so we had some feedback from the council, and interestingly, from all of those city departments who said, "Can we keep this team together?" And we've been asked by the council, "How can we keep this activity going?" And the conclusion we got to was the way that we can keep the team alive and together and an ability to deliver good service is you need to have someone who wakes up each day with this as their focus. And so starting the 1st of October, Roxanne Favors from the Aviation Department will be joining John's team, focused on large event support and management, particularly with these outside events in the downtown. And so we think it's a start. This activity, will help John. John can self-fund this. I think it remains to be seen how or if we need to expand that in the future. But we think it's a good first step to make sure we're appropriately prepared to match up with the private sector's interest in downtown and to organize city staff to deliver success. And so we're excited. We think the future has amazing possibilities, almost to the extent of I'm nervous some days as I see the volume of activity coming to make sure we're ready with both our private partners in downtown and with these event promoters. But I'm above all excited, believe downtown is really ready to be a showpiece for the region and has delivered that and is going to continue to do so. And with that, I think the whole team would be ready to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, great. I'll open it up. Any questions or comments? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the Super Bowl made Phoenix shine around the world, and I am very excited to see this continue. And I think you're absolutely correct. I think we are going to be a great place to not only host the events, but to shine. And I truly support your request to, I believe, assign a person to coordinate all this. It was a challenge for the Super Bowl. Staff rose to the occasion, but truthfully, we weren't quite as busy as we were. Economy's picking up, businesses picked up throughout the city, and you need someone who can be the primary coordinator that keeps the momentum going and keeps track of the details. So I'm very supportive, and I would move approval.
Great. Councilwoman?
It will be exciting to have the spotlight back on downtown. One of the things that was most exciting to me about the Super Bowl Central campus was it brought people from across the valley into downtown, and they could see how much downtown Phoenix had changed. Many people had not been there for a decade or more, and were really impressed with what we're doing. And downtown is going to look substantively different than it does today. Even by January, there's so much activity going on. So we'll hope we can continue to build on the momentum, and I really appreciated the host committee going out and promoting Super Bowl Central to people in the other areas of the valley, and I hope we can continue to do that. And also wanted to give you the host committee and others kudos for highlighting teachers and then partnering with our food banks. I think a lot of us have on our mind that the power outage, I think, apparently hit St. Mary's Food Bank very hard, and although they will have recovered by January, I think it's been a difficult year, and so wonderful job on picking those areas. We did hear feedback from the local community that the Super Bowl had such strong ties with specific national sponsors that they didn't always get a chance to highlight all of our local food and beverages. And my understanding is that this partnership, there's still a lot of national sponsors, but that there might be more opportunities for our local vendors to share their wonderful products.
Sure. Great question, Councilwoman. And with the CFP, they do also have their national sponsors tied into their ESPN broadcast partnership, but there is an opportunity again to highlight local vendors and restaurants. And while we want to promote on that granular level folks going in and out of the restaurants and bars by encouraging them to also participate in the special event liquor license area, we are looking to secure local vendors and keep the business local anywhere that we can. So while the CFP may be bringing in some of their contracted production companies from outside the state, locally we then work with them to identify vendors who can help with the tenting, with events within the event, with the traffic aid, and the different operational needs that we'll have. We really don't want to drive that business to the local vendors and companies. Absolutely.
Fabulous. And then I think you've already announced it, but it bears repeating. If local companies want to know more about business opportunities, what should they do?
I'm happy to give them my contact information. They can reach out to the local organizing committee. We also have an info email address, which I believe is just info@azchampgame.org, and can provide that to that additional information to anyone who's interested.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did want to point out, because of the success of the particularly of Super Bowl Central and the activity we see, the Convention Center Department actually has the existing resources contained within their budget, as well as a vacant position that allowed them to actually redirect that work for this activity already contained within the budget authorized by the City Council. So I think we're able to redirect resources that we already had, that you already authorized, into a new activity, in part because of the success of Super Bowl Central and the activity we see. John's going to have the revenues that really make this be successful. So we're actually kind of off and running, but we are so appreciative of all your support as we try to affect having adequate infrastructure and staff support to help make the work of the AOC and others successful.
Good. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation. Exciting to see what's coming. And it's hard to imagine, more excitement than when we had the roots down here and everything. But it sounds like you're going to the next level, so that's great. On the teacher summit, just curious how you are identifying those districts or those teachers to invite, and if there would be a part that the city might be able to play in that effort.
Sure, Councilman, we are working with the CFP. Again, it is one of their signature events, but locally being the boots on the ground for them to identify the schools, the teachers, and I'd be happy to connect you with the appropriate folks or provide that contact information to those who are interested. We're hoping to bring in, I think, anywhere from 700 to 1,000 teachers. It'll be a great, almost TED Talks-like summit for the teachers. So we'll have various influential speakers attending that to also meet and address the teachers who will be there.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Gates, that's a great question. I think perhaps city staff can help the various council offices or the mayor's office. If they have suggestions, we'd be really pleased to help organize those because you all have school districts as well as individual schools where that'd be a great opportunity, I'm sure, and so we'll circulate to make sure you have an opportunity that we can help organize for you to advance something through DEVNY, the AOC, off to the CFP to request their evaluation of those requests.
And if I may just add, from a timing perspective, there will be a soft launch of the program in early October. So we'll begin to see more awareness and education around that program. But know that we're really trying to keep all of the money local so that donors can choose to have the monies donated to the local schools, teachers who are nominated for the program. So it will be very important to really promote and garner that participation in the program so that we can keep the money locally with the education system here.
I appreciate that. It's very exciting. One of the most important points I think made here is, and I want to commend you for realizing that we do need someone who is focused on this effort. And I think Ms. Favors is a perfect person for helping to lead that charge. And look, hopefully she'll have to expand at some point. Some of these details that we all care very much about, from our local economy and education, and those are all things that she can help, I think, in this position, can help coordinate all of those things and make sure that we're highlighting this region, not just the city of Phoenix, but this region and this state in the most appropriate way, nationally, and of course all the way down to local. And so that particular position is going to be a key. And if that person at some point gets to a point where, or if that, whatever you want to call it, that department, she's a one-person department, I don't. But the point is, if we're talking about expanding that, let's not forget we're running on our leanest government in 40 years. So we're definitely doing more with less. But that just means that we are becoming even more efficient, and we're doing more. This type of activity, both on a national level and with all the other things that we have coming up. So it's good. Thank you. We don't.
Need a motion?
No, we do not. We're okay.
Good. That's better yet.
Now the next item, 9, call to the public. We don't. Okay. Future agenda items. I believe we have. Okay.
You do? I apologize. I'm the ignorant one of the room.
No.
So we will be back with you shortly, particularly, I think I'd like to note is upcoming next month, as we'll be talking about 2 important issues. One is the budget for the Enhanced Municipal Services District, where we contract with the Downtown Phoenix Partnership, is upcoming, and I think it's going to be reflective of these issues surrounding events and the need to continue to invest. And it appears that the property owners are very interested in investing more into events and attracting and promoting. And then second, we are coming back, following up on a dialogue we've had with you for more than a year about a possible second Enhanced Municipal Services District in Roosevelt. And so we'll be in a position to tell you what the community has said, what we know, and to get your feedback and direction. And if there are any other items, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, we'd be pleased to take them.
Any thoughts? Of course, we can revisit that as well. Okay. Hearing no other future agenda items, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.